The word benched has been very, very common in pro wrestling circles throughout much of this year, thanks in part to WWE President Nick Khan. Speaking to the media ahead of WrestleMania 41, he famously said that unlike the other company, WWE does not sign people and bench them. He essentially means warehousing people, right? Signing them up and then using them a little bit and then just not using them at all. And to be fair, AEW has done a fair bit of this over the years. This is partly a consequence of the company having a massive roster, too many to evenly spread out, even across Dynamite, Collision and Ring of Honor. They've got a lot of wrestlers under contract. So today, we're going to run through some of the wrestlers that are actually benched at the moment, maybe talk about some of the reasons for that, speculate a little bit, cover some of the news stories as well. A quick word though, we're not obviously going to include people who are injured, right? Or people who are going through visa situations like Hikaru Shida reportedly is, for example. So none of that here, just people who are seemingly fit, healthy, and ready to go, and for some reason just aren't being used. I'm Andy, and these are 9 wrestlers from AEW that Tony Khan has benched. Number 9, Jack Perry, who we have not seen having a match in AEW since November 2024 when he lost the TNT Championship to Daniel Garcia. He did of course wrestle on Wrestle Dynasty on the 5th of January, which is sort of an AEW show, but since then, nothing from Jack at all. Should note as well that on this list, if you've not had a match or whatever in the last 3 months, you are eligible to be included on this list. Jack, recently, his name did come up on the BTE YouTube channel, being the Elite. The Young Bucks were, chilling's probably not the word, but they were sitting in a pile of pizza after Forbidden Door, hanging out, when Jack's name came up as a call, and they rejected it straight away. So that is at very least a sign of life when it comes to Jack and AEW maybe doing something again together. He is still contracted, he hasn't been released or anything like that. He's just on the bench while the Young Bucks are in the trench. So it looks like maybe, if that's something that's going to be paid off, he might be on his way back. But until then, he's just a guy who's been inactive for 8 whole months. Number 8 is Ortiz. Now, this is an interesting case because he hasn't actually had a match in AEW or Ring of Honor since January 2024. Now, he was injured at the time, an injury that kept him out until March 2025, but he has since been back in the ring working a bunch of indie dates this year. He is cleared, according to a July report from Fightful Select. He just isn't being used by AEW. Now, the situation with Ortiz is kind of tied to his former tag team partner Santana a little bit. Mike Santana is no longer in AEW. He's over in TNA, where he's just completely reinvented himself, and for companies like House of Glory on the indie scene as well. But since that tag team dissolved a few years before Santana even left, he has kind of struggled for appearances a little bit, Ortiz. It's very close with Eddie Kingston, so perhaps an Eddie Kingston comeback could see something for Ortiz, but until then, he is literally on the bench, working lots of indie dates here and there, keeping himself busy in pro wrestling. Look, the tag team is a unit that I'm a very big fan of. I think it was sad to see the team go the way it did, but personal stuff is personal stuff and it's nobody's business but theirs, even though some of it inevitably plays out in public, as is the wrestling way. But yeah, Ortiz, talented guy, not necessarily somebody that I don't think AEW is ever going to strongly push as a singles act, unfortunately. So we'll see what the long-term future brings, but somebody I'm a big fan of and at the heart of some of the more memorable moments, at least in AEW's initial few years. Number 7 is The Butcher. This is somewhat similar to Ortiz in that tag team stuff, right? His partner, The Blade, has been injured for a very long time. He's been out for ages and ages, and there's no word on when he might be cleared or ready to go again, which probably impacts things a bit for The Butcher, but Butcher hasn't been on AEW TV since he wrestled Gabe Kidd in February, and he was kind of on and off a little bit before then. He has worked a few indie dates quite recently for Beyond and Wrestling Open, but in terms of AEW, there hasn't been anything, which, look, this is one of my favorite wrestlers, so, personal bias definitely creeps in with my analysis here. But he's a badass, man. He's a big bruising dude and a very, very, very solid utility player. I really enjoyed the single stuff that he was doing debuting shortly after Blade got injured. And obviously, huge fan of the tag team. I think some of the more chaotic and hardcore style matches they had with the likes of the Natural Nightmares and the Young Bucks stand up as some of the best TV matches of the early days of AEW. So big sentimental favourite. Love me the Butcher. I wish he was on AEW TV again. Does it, just kicking ass and whatever else. He's also really good at putting people over. So if you want to use him in that role, pretty convincing tough guy for somebody to overcome on the way up the card or whatever, or even give him a few wins himself. I don't know, man. I can't make any sense of why some of these folk aren't being used. I'm just telling you that they're on the bench for whatever reason the promotion has decided. Some of them are probably quite silly, though. Love the Butcher. Get him on TV. Number 6, Private Party. And the reason AEW is probably not using, this is me speculating here, but the reason they're probably not using Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn is maybe to do with WWE. We know that Private Party's contracts are due to expire soon, if they haven't already. Summer, I believe, was the reporting line on their AEW contracts. But we haven't seen them since January when they lost the AEW tag team titles to the Hurt Syndicate, of course. And since then, nothing at all. It has been reported that WWE are interested in bringing them in. They are still young, even though AEW is 6 years old and they were day one signings. Still young guys, still guys who could be molded into various different roles throughout their careers. And it will be a shame in many ways to see an AEW original project like that leave the promotion. But they aren't being used, and it doesn't look like they're going to be used again until those deals expire, unless they do agree on some kind of extension. They had the tag team championships, they won them last year, of course, which I think theoretically was a stronger idea as a moment, right? The day one tag team finally winning the belts. The story execution was a little bit rushed. At the end of the day, it did face a little bit of criticism, but I think that the match itself was really, really good when they faced the Young Bucks. So, not too sure what the future holds for Private Party just yet, but it does look like maybe they'll be on their way out of AEW and perhaps into the open arms of WWE. Number 5, Danhausen. Probably the weirdest situation on this whole list because Danhausen hasn't been used for AEW since late last year when they brought him back into Ring of Honor and then precisely did nothing with him. I'm going to actually have to look up his last match under the AEW Ring of Honor. It was last February, by the way, 2024. So yeah, that's completely insane. That's a year and a half. Now he has been injured, right? He's been out of action, and AEW has used this quite recently, according to Fightful, I believe the report came from, to extend his contract. Now, obviously AEW has the power to do that. It is written into the contracts that you, the independent contractor, can have your terms extended if you miss any time due to extenuating circumstances like injuries. However, for me, if you're not going to book him and he doesn't want to be there, why would you do that? Why would you keep hold of him? Why would you keep him under contract? Now, I'm a big Danhausen guy. I think he's a lot of fun. He's also a guy that probably when he's on the indies, I mean, you can imagine that guy is shifting an insane amount of merch at the table after he's had his match. And he has done indie dates while he's been away from AEW. And yet, WWE have been reported to be interested in him. There was a report recently that The Rock is a big fan of Danhausen. Hey, why not? Why the hell not? Book it for WrestleMania next year, I say. What a wild and wacky world we live in. But again, don't see the point in extending the dude if you're not going to use him. If he doesn't want to be there, I think it's best to just say, hey, okay, cool. Mutually, let's part ways on all of this. So I hope to see him back in a spotlight soon, whether it's with AEW or somewhere else completely. I love my very evil man. Indeed, he's very good. And it would be great to see him back in action. I'd just get him on TV. He's so much fun. Number 4, Kamille. Speaking of weird, what the heck is going on here, right? So they brought Kamille in just last summer, to be the heavy for Mercedes Moné. That lasted a couple of months. Mercedes got rid of her. And since then, no Kamille in AEW. She was on TV for about 2 or 3 months, and then on the bench you go. Bye-bye. Her last match was in October 2024 in AEW. She has done a couple of indies or other dates since then. She's just simply not being used in AEW. So if you're going to go to the trouble of signing somebody, and you'd imagine that WWE were interested in her because she kicks ass, why would you not be interested in Kamille if she became available? you're going to sign her, you're going to book her, and then you're going to do this story, and then you end the story without a proper payoff. There was never a match between the two or anything like that. It was just done. What's the point? What was the purpose of any of this? Was there ever any real plan when she was signed? Did they have any goal with that story? Was it designed to get Kamille over? Was it designed to have some kind of payoff? Did they have to change it along the way? I just have so many questions about this situation. And there's probably a lot that goes into it right behind the scenes that we're just not privy to. But on the surface level, from where we are standing as outsiders, it just seems incredibly weird to even bring her in the first place if you're not going to use her in any meaningful capacity beyond a story that never properly finished. Truly weird, truly strange. Let's move on. Number 3, Jeff Jarrett, who earlier this year was involved in something of a Hail Mary world title chase program. He announced that he was going to retire, but before he wanted to do that, he wanted to have one last Outlaws go for the world title. This saw him become entangled with MJF, with whom he had a not very well received series of exchanges. Jeff then had a not very well received TV match with Claudio Castagnoli, and since then, basically nothing. They dropped the story cold. Reportedly, due to the reception it got, people did not like this story. It was taken quite negatively. It was canned, so you can kind of understand the choice made there, right? If nobody likes it, throw it in the bin. That's probably what they've done. But since then, very little from Jarrett at all. He's not wrestled for AEW. I don't think since that Claudio match in January, which is absolutely mental. They canned the storyline, but I mean, look, there's still other things you can do with Jeff Jarrett. He's a guy who's had good matches since he came into AEW. I'm a big Jeff Jarrett guy in general. I think he's one of the all-time great workers, quite frankly, inside the ring and out. I've got a lot of time for that man and the charm that he brings to pro wrestling. He has worked elsewhere. He's done a bunch of dates, like 3 or 4 dates independent of AEW since the big story with the world title ended. And look, it probably was for the bet. That story, I was kind of into the idea. I like the idea of the old gunslinger putting one valiant loss on the table because he wasn't going to win the belt in the end. I quite like that story, but the way it played out on TV didn't work. It didn't work. So understand the reasons for ditching it. Just wonder why maybe you didn't come up with something else in the interim. Perhaps just not a priority at this stage. And look, Jeff's in the twilight of his career. He probably gets it. He's probably chilling, making his money hanging out somewhere. So shout outs to Jeff, legend of the game, legendary worker, one of the best to ever do it in that regard. A lot of time and admiration for him. Number 2 is Chris Jericho, and if you told me at the beginning of AEW's life that the first person to hold the company's world title would eventually be benched 6 years later for 4 months or 5 months or however long it's been, I would have probably called you a big liar. Jericho hasn't wrestled since April. His last major feud was the Bandido stuff, and that was designed to put Bandido over for the Ring of Honor title and all of that good stuff. Pardon me, since then, we've not had a peep from Chris Jericho on AEW programming. Now, he is cleared to compete. At the time of recording, he was not on tour with Fozzy, I believe. So he is available to be used, but his contract is up later this year or at the beginning of next year, and the word on the sheets is that he might be on his way back to WWE. There has been internal rumblings, that perhaps he will go back to WWE and re-debut in the 2026 Royal Rumble, which would be quite poetic actually, because his last WWE match was the greatest Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia. Rumble next year, is in Saudi Arabia too, so it's a weird circle that kind of makes sense. He's obviously a huge name when it comes to AEW and the promotion's launch. He was hugely important. I know, people really soured on him over the past couple of years with the Learning Tree and the Jericho Appreciation Society and the millions of heel stables. Each one was kind of worse than the other. But let's not get away from the fact that he was superb in this company's early days. Le Champion was flipping fantastic. I almost swore there. One of my favorite AEW title runs to date. The Cody rivalry was tremendous. The Moxley rivalry too. I think he was the perfect first guy. And even since then, he's had great stuff in isolation. It's just, as time passes by, there is a bit more evidence that maybe the master of reinvention is running out of reinventions. I'd love to be proved wrong on that. If he comes back or goes to the Fed or whatever and he comes up with another thing and it really gets over again, I will put my hands up and say, fair play, Chris Jericho, you old dog, you've done it again. And who would bet against him at this stage? It's what he's made a career out of. How many times has Chris Jericho been called washed up and then he's just gone, doof, here's Le Champion, here's the list, whatever. It goes on and on and on. We definitely haven't seen the last of Y2J in wrestling. We will see him again, I imagine quite soon, and I imagine it will probably be at the Royal Rumble. Number 1, Britt Baker, another very important figure from AEW's at least the first 4 or 5 years or whatever. Britt Baker was absolutely huge for the company's women's division. When she shed the babyface stuff and went full on heel and developed that persona, even while she was injured, hanging out with Reba and the wheelchair and the crutches in the leg and all that stuff, she really got over to a huge degree. The rivalry with Thunder Rosa, coming back, doing the stuff with Jamie Hayter, everything in between. Britt Baker was a big star for AEW, and we should never get beyond that just because her latest contributions to the company haven't gone quite as well. She was out for a long time ahead of returning and facing Mercedes Moné in Wembley Stadium, which wasn't particularly well received, unfortunately. She was back on AEW television for a while after that, and the last time we saw her was last November, when she had a match, Penelope Ford, I think she beat, and she was confronted by Serena Deeb afterwards. And then the very confusing choice was made for Britt Baker to stand in the ring, look up the ramp and go, nobody cares, while Serena Deeb was there, just burying any intrigue that may have existed for that match. Deeb has been injured recently, that's why she's not on this list. She's struggling through a knee situation. But Baker has just straight up been benched. Fightful have reported several times that there's no word on any creative being come up for her. She's just, I don't know. She's just not being used, and she hasn't been used in the past 9 months or so. Now look, it's entirely possible, this isn't reporting, this is just me speculating. It's entirely possible that she's still dealing with some residual injury issues because she was out for a very long time. And she had a very grueling recovery. So perhaps that factors into it. Perhaps she just has other priorities in her life right now. Who the heck knows? Perhaps AEW has other priorities as well. But still, no Britt Baker for 9 or 10 months. It's been ages since she's been around. There's no word on when she will jump off the bench and back into action, if at all. So we will just have to wait and see on that. Who have I forgotten to list today? I'm sure there are plenty more examples on the AEW roster of people who aren't injured, aren't dealing with visa issues, or aren't away for other reasons. They just aren't on TV, and it hasn't been explained. Let me know in the comment section below. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Goodbye.